Jack in the Box edition. Jack in the Box edition. Bro, how do you open this thing? Oh. Jack in the Box edition. Jack in the Box edition. Mm. Mm. Mm, 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 mm. Mm, mm. Okay. Let's get started. It is not your will that it should happen, then I will give up my desire. It was my only desire, my blessed joy. My soul is upright, I bear no secret grudge, because you refused it. He would not have been forgotten. He would have saved many by his example. Yet he would not have become the father of faith. For it is so great to give up one's desire, but greater to stick to it after having given up. It is great to grasp hold of the eternal, but greater to stick to the temporal after having given up. But then came the fullness of time, and Abraham not had faith. Then Sarah would surely have died of sorrow, and Abraham, dull with grief, instead of understanding the fulfillment, would have smiled as at a youth. What? Smiled at it as at a What? Smiled it as at a youthful dream. But Abraham believed, and therefore he was young, for the who always hopes for the best becomes old, deceived by life, and he who is always prepared for the worst becomes old permanently. But he who has faith retains eternal youth. All praise then to the tale, for Sarah, though stricken in years, was young enough to covet the pleasure of motherhood, and Abraham, though gray of head, was young enough to want to be a father. Outwardly, the wonder of faith is in Abraham and Sarah's being young, for it happened accordingly to their expectations. In a deeper sense, the wonder of faith lies in Abraham and Sarah's being enough young enough to wish, and in faith's having preserved their wish, and through it their youthfulness, he accepted the fulfillment of the promise. He accepted it in faith, and happened according to expectation and according to the faith. For Moses struck the rock with his rod, but he did not believe. Man, you gotta believe. Mm. Mm. So there was rejoicing in Abraham's house when Sarah was bride on their golden wedding day. But it was not to remain so. Abraham was to be tried once more. He had fought with the subtle power that invests everything, with the watchful opponent that never takes a nap, with that old man who outlives everything, time itself. He had fought with it and kept his faith, but all the horrors of the struggle were to become concentrated in one moment. And God did tempt Abraham, and said unto him, Now take thy son, thine only son Isaac, whom thou lovest, get thee into the land of Moriah, and offer him for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains which I will tell thee of. So all was lost, more terrible than if it had never been. So the Lord was only making sport of Abraham. Through the miracle he had made the presumptuous come true. Now he would see it again, brought to nothing. Foolery indeed, but Abraham did not laugh at it, as Sarah had laughed when the promise had first been proclaimed. All was lost. 70 70 years, faithful expectation, the brief joy of faith's fulfillment. Who is it then that snatches the staff from the old man? Who is it that demands that the old man himself should break? Who is it that makes a man's gray hair forlorn? Who is it that demands that he himself should make them do so? Is there no comparison for the venerable graybeard, none for the innocent child? And yet Abraham was God's chosen, and it was the Lord who put him to test. All was now surely lost, the glorious memory of the human race, the promise in Abraham's seed. It was only a whim, a fleeting thought of the Lord's, which Abraham himself must now eradicate. That glorious treasure, as old as the faith in Abraham's heart, many, many years older than Isaac, the fruit of Abraham's life, hollowed with prayers, ripened in struggle. Wow, it's really good. The blessing on Abraham's lips, this fruit was now to be plucked out of season and have no meaning. Oh, that's also really good. For what meaning could there be if Isaac was to be sacrificed? That sad yet still blessed hour when Abraham should take leave of everything he held dear, when he should raise his venerable head one more time, when his countenance should be radiant as the Lord's, when he should oh, concentrate his whole soul in a blessing with the power to give Isaac's joy all day. That moment was not to come, for yes, Abraham would indeed take leave of Isaac, but it was he that was to remain. Death would divide them, but Isaac was to be the victim. The old man was not to lay his hand upon Isaac in blessing, but weary of life was to lay it upon him in violence, and it was God who tried him. Yes, woe, woe to the messenger who come before Abraham with such tidings. Who would have dared be the emissary of such sorrow? Yet it was God who tried Abraham. But Abraham had faith, and had faith for this life. Yes. Whoa, that was lit. Mm, mm, mm. His faith only been a future life, it would indeed have been easier to cast everything aside in order to hasten out of this world to which he did not belong. But Abraham's faith was not of that kind. If there is such for a faith like that, is not really faith, but only its remotest possibility. A faith that has some inkling of its objects at very edges of the fields of vision, but remains separated from it by a yawning abyss in which despair plays its pranks. But it was for this life that Abraham believed. He believed he would become old in his hand, honored among his people, blessed in his kin, eternally remembered in Isaac, the dearest in his life, whom he embraced with love for which it was a poor expression to say that he faithfully fulfilled the father's duty to love the son, as indeed the summons put it, the son whom thou wait, yeah, the son whomst, whom the son whom thou lovest. Jacob had 12 sons, and he loved one. Abraham had just one, the son he loved. But Abraham had faith and did not doubt. He believed the absurd. If Abraham had doubted, then he would have done something else, something great and glorious. For how could Abraham have done other than what is great and glorious? He would have marched out to the mountain in Moriah, chopped firewood, set light the fire, drawn his knife, and he would have cried out to God, "Do not scorn the sacrifice. It is not the best I possess, that I well know. For what is an old man compared with the child of promise? But it is the best I can give. Let Isaac never come to know, that he may comfort himself in his young years." He would have thrust the knife into his own breast. He would have been admired in the world and his name never forgotten. But it is one thing to be admired, another to be a guiding star that saves the anguished. Whoa. Dude, this is good stuff, man. But Abraham had faith. He did not beg for himself in hope of moving the Lord. It was only that time when the just punishment had been proclaimed upon Sodom and Gomorrah, that Abraham came forward with his prayers. What we read in those holy scriptures, and I quote, "And God did tempt Abraham and said unto him, Abraham, Abraham, where are you? But Abraham answered, I am here. You, to whom my speech is addressed, was that the case with you when you saw far off the heavy fate approaching? Did you not say the mountains hide me, to the hills fall on me? Or if you were stronger, did your feet nevertheless not drag along the way? Did they not hanker, as it were, to get back into the old tracks when you were called? Did you answer, or did you not? Perhaps softly in a whisper? Not so, Abraham, gladly, boldly, trustingly, he answered out here, Here I am. We read further, and Abraham rose up early in the morning. He hurried as though to some celebration, and he was at the appointed place, the mountain of Moriah, early in the morning. He said nothing to Sarah, nothing to Eliezer. After all, who could have understood him? Hadn't the test by its very nature exacted an oath of silence from him? And he clave the wood, he bound Isaac, he kindled the fire, he drew his knife. My hearer, many a father has felt the loss of his child as the loss of the dearest he has in the world. To the bereft bereft of every hope for the future. Yet no son was the child of promise, in the sense that Isaac was for Abraham. Many a father has lost his child, but then it was God, the unchangeable and inscrutable will of the Almighty. It was his hand that took it. Not so with Abraham. For him a harder trial was reserved, along with the knife of fate. Isaac, a hard trial was reserved. What? Along with the fate of Isaac, who was put into Abraham's own hands. Okay. And he stood there, the old man, with his only hope, but he did not doubt. He did not look in anguish to left or right. He did not challenge heaven with his prayers. He knew it was God the Almighty that tried him. He knew it was the hardest sacrifice that could be demanded of him, but he also knew that no sacrifice was too hard when God demanded. And he drew his knife. Who gave strength to Abraham's arm, who kept his right arm raised so that it did not fall helplessly down. Anyone who saw this would be paralyzed, who gave strength to Abraham's soul so that his eye did not become too clouded to see either Isaac or the ram. Anyone who saw this would become blind, and yet rare enough, though they may be those who are both paralyzed and blind, still more rare is he who can tell the story and give it its due. We know it, all of us. It was only a trial. Had Abraham doubted as he stood in the mountains in Moriah? Had he looked about in indecision? With the knife, he had accidentally caught sight of the arm of the ram, and God had allowed him to offer it in place of Isaac. Then he would have gone home. Everything would have been as before. He would have had Sarah. He would have kept Isaac. And yet how did it change? For his withdrawal would have been a flight, his deliverance an accident, his reward a dishonor, his future perhaps damnation, then he would have borne witness. Then he would have bore witness, not to his faith or God's mercy, but how to whoa, man, what? But to how dreadful was the journey to the mountain in Moriah. Abraham would not be forgotten, nor the mountain, yet it would not be mentioned like a rat when the ark came to land, but as a horror, for it was here Abraham doubted. Oh, that's sick. That's cool. It's like giving all the scenarios possible. Venerable Father Abraham, when you journeyed home from the mountain in Moriah, you needed no speech of praise to console you for what you have lost, for in fact you gained everything and kept Isaac. Was it not so? The Lord never again took him from you. You sat happily at the table with him in your tent as you do in hereafter in all eternity. Venerable Father Abraham, thousands of years have slipped by those days. But you need no late-coming lover to snatch your memory from the power of oblivion, for every mother tongue commemorates you, and still you reward your lover more gloriously than anyone. You make him blessed hereafter in your bosom. You captivate his eyes and his heart in the here and the now with the marvel of your deed. Venerable Father Abraham, second father to the human race, you who first saw and bore witness to that tremendous passion that scorns the fearful struggle with the raging elements and the forces of creation in order to struggle with God instead, you who first knew the supreme passion, the sacred, the pure, the humble, the expression of divine madness, which pagans admire. Forgive him who would speak in your praise if he did not do it correctly. He spoke humbly. Seeing it his heart's desire, he spoke briefly, as it is fitting, but he will never forget that you needed 100 years to get the son of your old age against every expectation that you had to draw the knife before keeping Isaac. He will never forget that in 130 years you got no further than faith. All right. Then we're at the second part of it. But I'm going to clock out here because I want to eat this Jack in the Box, but I don't know where my bookmark is.